You ready to get going? Okay. I need a harmonica and a guitar. Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show. So, okay, everybody, welcome to the Collecting the King podcast show. My name is Robert Alaniz, and I'm a dealer, Elvis Presley dealer. Have been for about 30 years or so, and I'm going to be the host of the show. And today, my wife Carol is behind the camera. She's got to play the director and the camera person at the same time. This is the first show. Basically, how it all came to be was I've been doing a show in Memphis, Tennessee for many, many years, like a collecting show. I think it started back in 1992, I think, is when the show first started. It was at the Ramada Inn on Brooks Road in Memphis, Tennessee, maybe a mile and a half north of Graceland. It was called the Elvis for Everyone show, but it was supposed to be like Elvis for everyone, meaning collectors and fans both. That went on for quite a while, and I think in the later part of the 90s, we started doing, we changed the name of the show to Elvis Con because we were able to open up the rooms of the hotel that we're at, and we expanded into another area. And because we were able to have more tables and everything, I was hoping to try to fashion the show a little bit like Beatle Fest in Chicago, which is where I'm from. The show grew, it got bigger, and we had more dealers and more notoriety. We had people coming in from television. Major networks were coming in doing little spots, like news spots on us.
45s you're looking for?
Elvis Everything is the specialty of memorabilia expert Robert Alaniz.
I think Elvis is becoming cool now.
Alaniz says 2002 has been the best year for Presley collectibles since Elvis left the building for good.
I think it touches something inside everybody because they got a piece of history, rock and roll history, and they got a piece of their own past that they can look at and relive.
The Travel Channel came in and did some spots, but it was a pretty popular show. I mean, we were probably the number one show out of maybe two or three others that were kind of smaller shows at the time. As time went on, we went into the 21st century, into like 2000, and once we got to 2000, there was some objection to us using the name Elvis Con. So we, for legal reasons and to appease Graceland, we decided, okay, well, we're going to change it to something else. I was writing a column for Elvis International magazine for quite a few years, and it was called Collecting the King, which I don't think is around anymore. My column was all about collecting records and CDs and memorabilia and things like that. And I would always discuss what was popular, what was hot, what wasn't, what the trends were, and that kind of thing. And it was a fairly popular column. So what I did was I already owned the rights to the name Collecting the King, so I decided to change it from Elvis Con to the Collecting the King show. Something kind of happened midstream where we were going to do a show at the Clarion Hotel, which is what it was called at one point. But what happened was things started changing there. It went under different managements and owners. And once that happened, everything became unstable. It was difficult to put on the show in the first place, but to have people and owners that didn't know who I was when I was calling, and we were kind of forced to go to the Peabody. So we did. We went to the Peabody Hotel and had a huge show there on the 30th anniversary. As a matter of fact, I can proudly say it was the biggest Elvis Presley convention ever in Memphis, Tennessee. So I can at least boast a little bit and say I had the biggest show of all when it came to Elvis. It was the closest we ever came to Beatle Fest because it was in the Tennessee Exhibit Hall at the Peabody in downtown Memphis. And it was huge. There were well over 100 and something tables. They were all full. We had plenty of guests coming through, and it was probably the best show I'd ever done. We stayed at the Peabody, and where Heritage Auction House actually had a couple auctions, and things just kept going to the 40th anniversary, where we finally decided that we were going to basically call it quits because it wasn't as profitable for us as we once thought. That's the history of the shows. I was telling that story very quick. You realize I covered 25 years in a matter of maybe 3 minutes? That's a miracle, just so you know. Those of you who know me know this, but for those who don't, I'm also a filmmaker, and I've done approximately 9 feature films, and I have one in the making that's coming up next year. And because of COVID-19, we had to put off the film and postpone it. So in the meantime, I wanted to do something that I could combine both of my passions with my passion for Elvis, the king of rock and roll, and filmmaking. I want to talk about collecting Elvis Presley memorabilia, mostly his records, because that's my passion, is Elvis vinyl, mostly the LPs, and then talk about other items too, like the CDs and different pieces of memorabilia, things like that. Even though CDs aren't as popular as they used to be, there's still some things that are still considerably popular. Like, for example, this here, which I got to make sure I turn so that you can see it, so it's not shining. This is a box set thing that came out with 3 CDs, and it was limited, and I think it was in a like a Sam's Club or something like that, and that's how you got it. Now it's gone. It's in the long box like CDs used to come out in the 80s when they were first released. And this one's sealed, so this gives you an example of a CD that's considered, collectible and has some value to it, especially if it's still sealed in its original box. CDs like this, or actually, no, you know what, this isn't RCA, but this year, of course, is the 50th anniversary of That's the Way It Is. And here's another CD that's worth well over $100. I've seen it sell for $150 or more, because this was the original master recording of That's the Way It Is. And when you open it up, to give you an idea what it looks like here, you can see the disc is inside. And when you open it up, I think it comes out like this. Here we go. You can see it's a gold disc. So let's see, does that show up? Yeah. So it's kind of a gold disc. And of course, this is to improve the quality of the film, of the CD and the music and the sound and everything, and that's what original master recordings were all about. I know the vinyls were basically cut at like half-speed masters to improve the sound qualities, and I never was really totally sure about what made the sound quality of the gold discs so popular, but anyway, that's another example. And then of course RCA decided, well, we're going to do one of our own, so here's another one. This is 24 karat gold disc, another gold disc, except this is not the original master recording. This is RCA's version, and this one is sealed with the sticker. And of course it has, you can see a little opening here, a die cut opening, where you can see the gold disc inside. Sorry, I don't have any close-ups of that. I could go like that, but I don't know how good that is. So anyway, that's another collectible. This thing, I've seen it sell for $75 to $100, something like that. The great CDs by Follow That Dream, which puts out, of course, some of the best stuff of Elvis's career has been done by Ernst Jorgensen and Roger Simone, who've done a great job of taking Elvis's old recordings and putting them together in new packages, and sometimes just taking the old albums and doing these classic revisions of the albums with mastering the sound and stuff like that. This is an example of a higher priced, rare CD, because the Follow That Dreams are limited. So once they're gone and they're no longer in print, and they go out of print, the prices and the values go up. So Out in Hollywood was one of the first to be done like that. And I'm not sure what the price of this is going for. It's something like $50 to $75. So anyway, that's another example of the CD. Then we have another thing I wanted to show you was memorabilia, for example. These are all pretty collectible too. If you can find any of the early magazines from the 50s and 60s, some of them are really worth a lot of money. Others are okay. But the ones especially that are all about Elvis, those are the ones that are worth the money, really worth the bigger money. Whereas these magazines are worth money because he's on the cover, and there's usually a short story or something with a few other photos inside. So again, that's an example of memorabilia. I'm going to have a little section, and let me get this out here, that I'm going to call the collector's box. And that is, for those of you who know me from the shows, this is my box that I always bring to the shows. And usually when I'm at the shows, people know that the higher priced records are always in this box. So every episode of the show, I'm going to open up this box and we'll take out a record, and it'll be kind of like the featured record, or maybe one or two like that. And, just to give you an example, let me see if I can pull something out here that's of interest, although none of these are really super of interest. But here's an example, like an early, let's see if I get that in the picture there, this way. Here's an early, the Christmas album. Oh, there it is. There's Elvis's Christmas album. Of course, it's a reissue from 1964, but it's still sealed and it's in beautiful condition. That's an example. Then we'll also have stuff like this, which you might look at, you might say, well, that's no big deal. But actually it is a big deal, because this is the orange Flex version of the NBC TV special. It's even got a little price tag on it, doesn't it? For $100. But that's what it goes for, because for some reason there weren't that many of these pressed. The orange rigid records were the ones that were more pressed of this particular album. So the flexible ones from 71 went for a lot more money. So that's just a little example of what's in the box, and we will have, particular special records like every show that we'll just have some fun with, and we'll talk about, and maybe show you the record and talk about why it's collectible and how much money it's worth and that kind of thing. I think everybody has that one piece of memorabilia or item. It wasn't a memorabilia at the time when they bought it, but they have that one thing that they bought when they were younger, like a 45 or an LP that became like the holy grail in their collection. And for me, it happened to be the soundtrack to Roustabout. It was 1964, around the time the Beatles came over. They were the big thing. And I remember going to school and everybody was talking about, this band that just came out. And all the girls were going crazy about them and stuff. And I had a friend of mine who was an Elvis fan, and I didn't know who Elvis was. And I remember going to his house, and we went to his room and listened to records. And he pulled out this album called Roustabout. The first time I listened to it, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I just became hooked on this guy's voice. For the most part, they were kind of cheesy songs, and but there was just something about him that really resonated with me. So much so that I actually went out, tried to raise money so I could buy the album Roustabout, because I was only 10 years old. And I remember riding my bike around, looking in ditches and trying to find empty pop bottles. And I would take the empty pop bottles back, and you return them, you get 2 cents. So I don't know how many pop bottles it took me to get $3, but I kept going and going until I got to $3. I went to Woolworth's in Blue Island, where I was raised and born, and I bought the Roustabout record. And I remember it was funny because I brought it home to my mom, and my mom sees me walk in the house with this record, and she goes, "What's that?" And I says, "Mom, it's Roustabout, it's Elvis." And she says, "Well, I can see that, but you don't have a record player." And I said, "Well, couldn't you get me one?" And sure enough, she did. She got me one for, I think it was my birthday. But it was so funny because between that time, the time I bought the record and I got the record player, all I did was sit in my room and look at the album cover. I mean, I memorized the whole album cover, every little thing, from the little guy smiling, looking up at Elvis, the big picture of Elvis, and then the 4 photos of Elvis from the movie on the back. And the music was the key to everything for me. I love Elvis's music, and that's that to me. That's the key as to why, as a collector, I collect the records. The records are the most meaningful to me. And I think maybe that might be different for somebody else who might have collected something else. Like there was something else they got by Elvis that maybe it wasn't a record. I mean, later generations, it could have been a CD. And then now that CD is now their Holy Grail. And I played these records to death. And I know you guys as collectors, you know exactly what I mean. You played them so much that the minute you put the needle on, it just through the whole thing, right? I think I had at least 5 or 6 copies of Roustabout, because every time I played it to death, I would go and buy another copy. Then as time went by, I decided to, start buying Elvis records again when I was in my 20s, and started collecting. And next thing you know, I got this book by a guy named Paul Lichter called The Boy Who Dared to Rock. And I remember this was in my hiatus when I didn't have any Elvis records and before I started collecting. I remember getting this book and seeing a catalog where it showed every single album that Elvis ever did, including foreign albums and bootlegs. And it like opened up this whole world to me, and I was just like obsessed. I wanted to get these records so I could see, what I missed, or listen to what I missed. And, even went out and started buying bootleg albums because I wanted to hear the song Dominic, where Elvis is singing to a bull about as an aphrodisiac, which is the craziest song in the world. I felt so sorry for Elvis having to even sing that song. But there were bootleg records out there that would have songs on them that were not available through RCA. And next thing you know, I'm buying bootleg records. But I wanted to at least introduce myself and give you guys a background of how much of an Elvis fan I am versus just a dealer or a collector. Because I think there are a couple different types of Elvis people. I think there are the true, honest fans who really love Elvis and love his music and have a passion for him. And then there's these other people who are collectors. And, this record's worth that much money? Okay, then I'm going to get this record. I'm going to get that record. And they become obsessed with collecting, but not really caring about Elvis himself. And they could care less if a new song was discovered, or if Elvis did 4 or 5 different takes of a song and he did them different ways. They never really cared about the music. It was always about the money and collecting. I'm not going to name any names, but I remember a dealer back in the 90s who, it was just a guy who all of a sudden became an Elvis dealer and said, I'm going to start dealing records and I'm going to become the greatest Elvis dealer of all time. And I remember him, asking him, well, what's your favorite, what decade is your favorite Elvis? And he said, well, I like the fat Elvis. So right away, I knew that this guy doesn't care about Elvis Presley. I mean, you don't say the fat Elvis if you care about Elvis. You would say, well, the 70s, or you would say the 50s or 60s. But no, he had to identify Elvis by his weight. So I knew then and there that he didn't care about Elvis or the songs or the music. All he cared about was getting the records and the prices and how much he could make off of this person or that person. I still to this day get excited when a new album comes out. When Follow That Dream puts out a new album, like I think this one here, which is Love Letters from Elvis. This is a Follow That Dream album. It's not the latest one, but this is a new album, brand new, and it's a 2-record set, and it's 180 gram vinyl. When this album came out and I saw the cover for the first time, it was like I went back in time, and I remembered like when I was a little kid driving my bike up to Woolworths and walking in and seeing the new Elvis album come out and get all excited about the cover. And I think a lot of younger people are starting to get that excitement now because all of a sudden Elvis Vinyl is taking off. I mean, it kind of went downhill for a while. I think in the 90s, when the 90s came along and CDs took over, I think the last Elvis record at that time was The Great Performances. And then after that, I don't think there were hardly any records that came out after that. It's kind of sad that that's the way it was, but we thought that records were gone. And then all of a sudden, in the 2000s, there's this resurgence where all of a sudden younger people are now getting the same excitement and thrill out of holding an Elvis record and listening to him and looking at the picture and everything that I got when I was a kid. Maybe not as much, but still significantly enough where Follow That Dream now produces albums. So we'll be talking about Follow That Dream releases. In an upcoming show, I'm going to talk about That's the Way It Is, because as I said, this is the 50th anniversary, and Follow That Dream has put out this incredible 2-book box set with 8 CDs of all of the rehearsal recordings Elvis did in prep for the movie, and that's going to be coming up in a future show as well. I want to have guests on the show, and one of my guests will be Jerry Osborne, who did the very first Elvis record price guide, I think back in the 70s. It might have been 77. I'm not sure of the exact date. This is Presleyanna 8. This is the latest edition of the book. And Jerry Osborne was the guy who started the book. I met Jerry in, I think it was 1987 or 88, and we became friends. And as time went by, I would share my knowledge of Elvis and the records and everything, because when I was younger, I collected everything Elvis. And I remember the records, I remember the stickers that went on the records, how many came out, how many labels there were, what color the labels were. I was totally obsessed with it. So I would share that with Jerry, and one day he kind of approached me and said, "Hey, how would you like to be like an editor or co-editor or contributing editor to the book?" And I jumped on the opportunity, and I think this is about the 5th book that I actually was a contributor to. And usually in the book, I usually handle the records, and of course that's my thing. Jerry, of course, makes his contributions from people who have sent in emails to him and updates for each new edition, and then he would send that to me. I would also have updates, and we would combine our updates, and we would go through the book and make adjustments to the prices and this and that. And of course, after eBay started, it was really, really hard to keep up with all of the price changes, because what something sold for on eBay wasn't necessarily something a person would buy, directly pay for. Jerry Osborne is, like I said, a good friend of mine, so I plan to have Jerry on the show. And of course, there'll be another book coming, Presleyanna 9, which will be coming out on the 45th anniversary, and we'll be talking about that too. In addition to Jerry, there's a very good possibility I'll be having guests on the show, like Joe Tunzi, who is also a book author. And if you're in the Elvis world, everyone knows Joe Tunzi and all the books that he's done and the videos. He's a huge Elvis fan. He's from Chicago, where I'm from, and we've known each other for many, many years. So I've talked to him and about possibility of being on the show. So I'm also good friends with Howard DeVorn, who is Al DeVorn's son. Al DeVorn is, of course, was Elvis's kind of like his tour manager and promoter, because he was always going everywhere with Elvis on tour. And he was usually in charge of all the souvenirs, like the posters and the buttons and anything that you bought at the souvenir stand. Plus, Al was also known for introductions. He was the guy that went up on stage when Elvis was before Elvis went on, and he would remind everybody about the super souvenirs. But he's also known for this popular phrase right here:
"Elvis has left the building. Thank you and good night."
Which is, of course, Elvis has left the building. A lot of people loved Al. He was a great guy. He passed away in an accident, an unfortunate car accident a while back. But I've become very good friends with his son, Howard. And Howard has some great stories, too, to talk about. His relationship with his father and his father's relationship with Elvis Presley. Plus, another person I'm going to have on is my BFF, Johnny B. I call him Johnny B, but his name is John Barancic. He's always been with me at all of the collectible shows. He's a huge collector, and he also collects a lot of oddball stuff, and really has become more of a specialist in Elvis reissues. Elvis's Golden Records has been reissued like 20 or 30 times, and John knows just about every single reissue and what's different between each and every one, or if there are no differences, he also knows that. Being that I was in Memphis for all these years, I think close to 30 years I've been going there during Elvis Week. I was always taking video footage at the shows, and my wife and I would always take pictures and stuff. So, I'm showing you some examples right now as I'm talking. You'll see some pictures and stuff. What's fun is looking at the past and seeing how these shows evolved from 1987, which was the first show I ever went to, all the way throughout the years. Hundreds, if not thousands of people would go to these shows. And from around the world. I mean, we met people from Germany, Norway, from Ireland, from Japan. I mean, you name it. It was incredible, the amount of people from other countries that loved Elvis so much that they would save their money up all year long just so they could come to these shows. I started out by doing another show in the area, which was at the Holiday Inn. And I started there. And then as time went by, I started my own show. We have plenty of photos and interesting pictures to show you from that time period. I never saw Elvis live in Vegas, but I'm very happy to say that all 3 times that he was in Chicago, starting in 1972 through 1977, I saw him every time he was here. And of course, the greatest thing was 72, because he was awesome. He walked out on stage and he glowed. It was probably one of the biggest experiences of my life. I'll never forget just the sight of Elvis Presley walking out at the Chicago Stadium on the afternoon show in Chicago, where he wasn't wearing a jumpsuit. He was wearing just a shirt and pants. And if you want to see exactly what he was wearing, it's on the back of the cover of a reissue of On Stage. So at this time, I'd like to thank you all for watching the show, and I hope this is enough to get you interested in coming back and watching future episodes of Collecting the King. Don't forget that if you enjoyed the show, to click the subscribe button below so that we can let you know whenever a show is coming out. And by all means, hit the like button if you like the show, and if you didn't like it, pretend that you never watched the show. And don't put anything. And finally, if you have comments, there's comments below too. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the show, or if you just want to say hi or whatever. We haven't seen you in Memphis in a while. So I want to thank my wife, Carol, for managing the camera and everything. And thank you all for coming. And I'm out of here.